Hey everybody, this is Al. We're back at the Kelly Writers House, and we're really excited for tonight's webcast. A couple of preliminaries, and I'm going to say hi to everybody, and we're going to get right into it. There was a wonderful post by Nicole Braun. I want to signal to my colleagues here what the first topic will be. Nicole wrote not too long ago, "I love, love, love jail poems. Kaufman is the real deal for me. I tried to get a copy of the book, but it's out of print." I think we need to talk about why Bob Kaufman is out of print. The irony of Kaufman. Anyway, so Nicole goes on about Kaufman, and I thought we would start there. So I'm going to prep my colleagues for how do you respond to Nicole, love, 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 jail poems, it's the real deal. Okay, and I'll also put the phone number out, but it sounds like we already got a call. But then I want to do some shout-outs before we get started. So the number is 484-352-2429. 484-352-2429, and Anna will answer the phone. Okay, first, shout out. The Palm Beach County Group, Florida, did a meetup, and they talked about Ezra Pound's The River Merchant's Wife, and they produced an amazing video. I mean, they actually did the editing, and they have titles. So I'm adding that to the CCCR syllabus, which I'm going to explain in a little bit. So shout out to Anthony Watkins, Marjorie Bloom-Schnabel, Chika Onyezi, Arif Dalvi, who's a mainstay. I really adore Arif, who is a neurosurgeon. Check that out. Connie Tusku and Roshan Desai, whom I also know from there. They recorded this close reading. I'm going to put the word out when we do it, when we put it up. I hope you'll watch it. The New York group, led by Mandana, did an audio recording. The Chicago group, led by Max McKenna, did a video. And Paige Polsine and Molly O'Neill and some others did a great video at a coffee shop in LA. We have 4 new collaborative, crowdsourced, worldwide close readings by ModPo people. And it's just, I mean, in only two of those 4 cases was it a TA convening you. Just want to say this is what we're all about. The CCCR is the Community Collaborative Close Readings Syllabus, which follows roughly the weeks and categories of ModPo, the main syllabus, but you'll find all people in the past 6 years, including this year, who've made videos, sort of copycat videos of the team at the table, and they are fantastic. So check it out. There's a thread called Bringing Texas Around the Bend, Week 6 with Philip Whalen, and a bunch of ModPoers in Texas, but they weren't limited to Texans. They just did a close reading in the asynchronous forum. There you go. And then they moved over and showed up to Jake Marmer's office hour and continued the conversation because it's Jake who told them to do the Whalen. Okay, last night, a bunch of people organized to invade Erika Kaufman's office hour, and that with the aim of discussing Gary Snyder's What You Should Know to Be a Poet, which is a poem that we just recently made a ModPo Plus video about, among other topics. That office hour got 66 views in an hour. I'm really happy about that. We just today are adding 3 new videos from the ModPo Plus, 2 ModPo Plus from the London webcast, including the 9-minute excerpt segment in which we talked about Stein's pedagogy. So there is now a Stein's Radical Pedagogy ModPo video in ModPo Plus. I just think, I mean, where else are you going to find that? Lily's like giving me the canned answer. I don't know, Al. Where are we going to find? Now, I just want to boast. I mean, that's great. I mean, Stein's pedagogy has been written about by Stein critics, but we have this 9-minute YouTube video. It's great. One of the others is the little thing we did where we collected a list of like a bibliography of ModPo poems that can be successfully taught to children 11 to 14 years old. There's like a little clip. So teachers who are working in middle school can now go and say, like, which poems are going to work? Okay, a couple of other announcements. Erika Baum, who created Dog Ear and the library, what is it called? Card Catalog and some others. She will be here on November 8th. It's a Wednesday, so she's going to be here with us for the live webcast. She's going to be joining us for a poem talk, and she's going to be doing a program at the Writers House that evening, and it'll be webcast or streamed live. I'm really excited about it. Norbesi Philip is coming on December 5th. I think, right? Is it 5th? I think it might be the 5th. So that program is going to be, that's a reading with Q Lee, another fantastic friend of the Writers House. Q's amazing. I've got this, what's happening with this? There, that's better. I'm a little tilty. This is an amazing book. And I'm so pleased that the next poem talk, which is November's poem talk, will feature Alexandria Johnson, Tracy Morris, who's a ModPo favorite, and Amber Rose Johnson. What do you get? What's that look like? Is that a scared, like, why are you shouting out to me look, or?
That's just a you said my name and I'm looking at you now look.
Amber Rose Johnson is one of the poem talkers, and we're talking about, I think, about 6 pages, 6 sections of this book. And this is my extra copy, so the second caller tonight is going to get a copy of this book. So I'm really happy about that. Okay, one final shout out before we get started with Bob Kaufman. This book just arrived in my mailbox yesterday, and what it is a collection of short essays which are essentially close readings of difficult poems. How about that? I like to think that...
What's a difficult poem, Al?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I think we should... Poems that are supposedly difficult.
Okay.
Poems that people say, oh, I don't know what to do with that. Can you give me a little help? You know, and many ModPo poems are like this. I like to think that Charlie Altieri and Nick Rice, who put this book together, actually I think specifically know that the close reading of supposedly difficult poems, which is the model and mode of ModPo, was an influence on the collection of this book. So... and I'm really, really happy. And it's got a lot of great things in it. Okay, so let's go back to Nicole. She says, love, love, love jail poems. It's just the real deal. So I want to say hi to Gabe. Hi, Gabe. Hey.
Hi. How are you?
How are you? Joe Massey. Good evening to you, Joe.
Good evening.
Hi. And now Zach's got them in tiny little boxes instead of big boxes. Is there any way to avoid that? I think I see... There, thank you. Molly's there from Los Angeles. Hey, Moll.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? There's all kinds of great dappled sunlight out there in L.A. Wow, what's happening? What time is it?
It's 2:40, and it's almost 100 degrees.
Lots of sunlight left in your day. And Erika Kaufman is here. Hi, Erika.
Hi, Al.
Hey, why don't we go... Oh, I'm sorry. Amber Rose Johnson, the aforementioned. Hello.
Hello, Al.
Hey. Lily Applebaum.
Hello.
Hi. Davey Niddle.
Hey, Al.
How are you? And Anna Strong. Hello. Al. Okay. And we also have Eric here. And we have some other friends who will get the mic, maybe, if they're not careful. But certainly Eric will. Okay. So why don't we start with Gabe and then go to Amber Rose. So... Bob Kaufman, the jail poems. While you're answering, Gabe, about why you might agree with Nicole that this is the real deal, I'm going to go to the text and maybe we'll pick out one passage or one section to talk about it. Gabe, you want to kick it off, please?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about it, excuse me, while we were doing introductions and stuff. And the passage that I think you might actually just go to on your own, but the passage I was thinking about was section 7. Sorry, I had to stretch my Roman numeral reading for a second.
V11.
Yeah.
Can I read it? Can I read it, Gabe?
Yes, please do.
Okay, good. Someone who I am is no one. Something I have done is nothing. Some place I have been is nowhere. I am not me. What of the answers I must find questions for? All these strange streets I must find cities for. Thank God for beatniks. That kicks ass, doesn't it? All right, why, Gabe?
The reason I went there is I was thinking about like the scene of this poem, which is being written in a cell, and we don't have section 1 here, but in section 1, the scene is set more literally saying, I'm in a cell, I'm hearing this, I'm seeing that. And there's a way in which I think Kaufman is kind of imagining himself like merged with the people around him, becoming the someone that's next to him, becoming the someone in the cell next to him. And here it's saying, I'm someone who's like me, or someone who is me is nobody. And so I feel like there's a nice empathy with people who are totally just disregarded, this sort of social nobody that he is with, that he's linked up to, not just in the space, but in his politics. And so this is a passage in which that is presented in a kind of difficult way. Like, I think people might struggle with someone who I am is no one, but we get a real good sense of that empathy across this political line, which is why I think this is the real deal, as you said earlier.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that. It's great. I want to turn to Amber Rose, and you could pick another section if you want, or stick with this one. But one of the things that Bob Kaufman does so well is to link up some of the modernist experimenting in subjectivity, right? Dispersed subjectivity, or subjectivity that wanders a little bit, and brings it up to what we might call the edge of postmodern poetry, where the roaming subject, a la so many of the poets of weeks 8, 9, and 10, this kind of evacuation of the self without losing any of the strength and confidence, sort of what Gabe just said. And also, so many of the beat poets, Ferlinghetti, whom I'm not a fan of Ferlinghetti, but Ferlinghetti's always talking about the police beating up, in San Francisco, beating up beatniks, right? And that's because they were, slovenly and long-haired and did a lot of hanging out on streets. Bob Kaufman got beaten up every time he went out. And there's, Bob Kaufman, you cannot say welcome that in the least. But jail was for him simply being who he was, right? Being part Jewish, African-American, a beatnik, street poet, jobless, etc. There's sort of, Maria Damon has written so beautifully about this. There's like seven ways in which Bob Kaufman inhabited certain identities, and for all of them he got beaten up. So it's sort of like 7 times over. And so Jail Poems for him is not simply a stance, as it is, I think, a lot for Ferlinghetti. It's where he ends up. So he's always talking, in this poem here, he's talking about what the police do to him. And basically he's saying, I am what I am because I've been pushed into this situation. I'm going to make something poetically really good out of it. Anyway, Amber Rose, any thoughts about Jail Poems?
There's so much that you just said. Yeah, so the sections that I got stuck on for this poem, or that I was really invested in, are sections 19 and 22. Is that, am I reading? Yeah.
22. Can I just read 22 and you can say something?
Can you read them both?
Yeah, what was the other one, 19?
19, the one just before it.
Yeah, 19 is so hard. Okay. I love 19. 19. Sitting here, would you perform these? Do you want to?
Sure, I can read them. Okay, 19. Sitting here writing things on paper instead of sticking the pencil into the air. Caught in imaginary webs of conscious, I weep over my acts, yet believe. So thinking about what you were saying, Al, about this like postmodern moment or the dispersal of the I, the subject, I think that's what is so interesting about 19. The choice between writing things down on paper and writing things in the air seem to be equally available options, and that it's just a decision to write on paper, not necessarily that it's more logical or more productive to write things on paper. I thought was interesting. But in terms of the real deal, I think that the tension that's in I weep over my acts yet believe is so kind beautiful. Is so keyed into, I very rarely think that there are like human experiences that everyone has, but that tension of doing what you don't want to do and yet having faith in something anyway is extraordinarily human, and I think is the tension that we have to continue to hold on to have any sense of hope for this crumbling world.
Yeah, that's so well put. Before we go to the phone, I just want to ask Joe Massey to react to 22. Caught in imaginary webs of conscience, I weep over my acts, yet believe.
Yeah, the imaginary webs of conscience are interesting to me. I think Kaufman, if I'm not mistaken, was interested in Buddhism, and the imaginary acts of consciousness could just be the world itself. I weep over my acts, yet believe that whatever action, that it's just a rejection of any kind of guilt, of just accepting the present.
Yeah, and also in a very superficial way, imaginary webs of conscience is such a beat-style phrase. In fact, many of the beats think about Bob Kaufman as sort of the centerpiece or ground zero of being beat, with not just being beaten down, but also beatitude. That combination he just embodies so perfectly. Let's go to the phone. That was a great start on this poem, and I hope everybody people who didn't know what to do with these little poems. I mean, Maria Damon uses the phrase Afro-imagist and also Afro-Buddhist and Afrobeat. Maria's essay she's done a lot of work on Kaufman, and it's full of those kinds of categorical offerings, which Kaufman was not interested in. He was not interested in those kinds of categories, but this is the real deal. So anyway, Anna, who's on the phone?
So we've got Philip Drexler calling from Austin, Texas, and he would like to talk about Rogue State. Anne Waldman's great.
Rogue State.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Philip.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I'm fine. I'm going to read to you. I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to read aloud to you Alana Shaw's comment on Waldman and ask you to respond to it, and then we'll turn to the panel and get their response. Okay, you ready?
All right.
All right. I'm sorry to do this to you because you're just going to have to hear it, and I know the connection isn't that great, but here it goes. This is Alana. Okay, this is Alana writing just a few minutes ago in the forums.
Okay.
Waldman's voice sticks in my head. The stuttering strength of a rogue state. I guess she's sort of saying that the voice is partly a rogue state as well, right? Right to her articulated finish of the poem. As we move through the decades of the 20th century into the 21st, how does the sound in spoken poetry change, or does it? Does sound reflect where we are as people and the entertainment we consume? That was a really leading question, right? How do our sounds witness our current condition? I think Anne Waldman would love that question. So, Philip, would you react to that, and then we'll ask Lily to do the same?
Hey, that's exactly what I was calling about, Al.
Great.
This is a political poem, so political words are going to be changed by the political climate as it changes. And this poem resonates so much more strongly today because aren't we all feeling like we're in a bit of an antic rogue state at this point in history? We're all feeling a little bit like Anne Waldman was back there in the 2000s, aren't we?
Yes, I totally agree.
Right, it's resonating with us so much more strongly, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. Your phone line, no fault of you, is doing like weird carnival sounds. Carnival sounds.
I'm in a weird place, and I was also going to state, aren't we being regarded as an antic rogue state by many people in the world now?
Yeah.
So it's so resonant.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that's a great point Alana's making.
Great.
Absolutely,
Philip,
I agree. That's why I called.
Thank you so much for calling. What we're going to do is have you listen to our responses offline so we can get away from the carnival sounds. But thank you for calling, and hello to Texas. Thank you, Philip. Lily, this is yours. I know you've thought a lot about this. He's right. The phrase rogue state in politics means, North Korea and Libya. It's one of the things rogue state means. And in a way, what Anne is saying is, because she talks about Bush in that poem, what she's saying is, we're the rogue state. So she's reversing that's kind of an obvious thing, but
yeah, well, but Alana's question about the like physical quality of the voice, I think like I was thinking about Anne as like a person who thinks a lot about the physical body and like performance, and by making the voice tremble and really focusing on the dynamics of her performance, she's saying literally like my body, like my specifically women's body, is like a part of this battle. Like I am the site of the battleground of this like political fight.
That's great. I'm going to play Rogue State and then ask Erika and Davey to comment any way you want, keeping in mind Alana's. Let me repeat the last part of it, Alana. Or as we move through into the 21st century, how does sound change, or does it? Does sound reflect where we are as a people and the entertainment we consume? It's a very edgy question. How do our sounds witness our current condition, which was Philip's point as well. Okay, so here's Anne Waldman performing Rogue State in this room back at the time of the Second Iraq War. In this room, it was kind of amazing.
State. I'm in a rogue state, honey, getting unpredictable and strange. Just a rogue state itching to test my Harridan bardic range. Ours for the radical ecologist on the fringe. Oh, is the opportunity to make first war powers cringe. G is the genius hacker under alien skin.
Wow, this is really relevant.
Better watch out, every female activist akin. I'm in a rogue state, Papa Ashcroft. Don't tell me what to do. Your rules aren't my rules, 'cause I'm the lady of misrule. Wild card they call me, imperious sultry dark, loose cannon on the gunnel. This literary cannon's got a subversive quark. National Missile Defense System got nothing on me. I can pierce through the Genome Project with a cyborg's vitality. Gated communities tremble. I'm a-comin' through the door. Rogue states a state won't humble. Call her witch. Call her whore. I'm in a rogue state, bushy. Don't tell me what to do. Your rules aren't my rules, 'cause I'm the lady of misrule. Rogue state, rogue state, rogue state.
Oh, there's applause. Sorry. Lots of applause. Wow. You know what, Davey? We've had ModPoers say, you know, I can't stand that voice. It's so scratchy. Why doesn't she say, you know, nothing. I don't mean to say bad things about someone who doesn't like this, but someone who doesn't like it is wondering why we're ecstatic listening to it and why we are charged up. And can you sort of explain why this gets you going?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the poems in ModPo are trying to figure out how to use language to deal with the fact that we live in a political climate that does stuff to everybody's body, that everybody's body is different because of the context that we live in, that everybody's body is altered by the fact of global capital and global power constantly by means of interacting with polluted infrastructure, by means of having to operate in a system that just hurts human bodies to be human bodies.
And it hurts especially when you can't get indoors at night, right?
Sure.
Which is getting back to Kaufman.
Right, yeah. Absolutely. And obviously there are super complicated politics about like whose bodies are hurt more and where those bodies are.
Right.
And I think that something that's super useful for me and something that's really exciting about listening to this Anne Waldman poem is just hearing a body within her voice be changed and need to change in order to be able to say where it is.
Nicely put. Erika, how about that? That was pretty great. You know Anne Waldman pretty well. What do you think of this?
I'm just sitting here thinking about the first time I heard Anne perform this piece, and she read it at Belladonna, and I remember it was around the time that a lot of people in New York were thinking about the idea of poetry as news. And what Davy said is kind of leading me to think about this poem and the importance of performance attached to the idea of poetry as news, as poetry as something that's a public and a civic actor, or as the performance of a poem being an activist action, if that makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense. And what you just said also, it helps explain why Rogue State, which is a ballad, why that fits in our conversation about the so-called beat revolution against centrism, conformity, quietism, and suburbanism, which is what the Beats either did or allegedly did stand against. And why a rhymed ballad? Why a return to some of the original aspects of poetry? It's sung from the rooftops and the steeple. It's sung as like a public warning. You know, the Lady of Misrule, that goes back to 17th and 18th century France, where you had topsy-turvy day, where the low were high and the high were low for a day. I mean, she's really going way back, and she's very interested in that, along with Helen Adam and others who are associated with the Beats, but who bring back, and of course, Allen Ginsberg, under the influence of Anne Waldman, returned to the ballad, the sung ballad, as a really important thing. We think of those generations as one influencing the other, but they were influencing both ways. So, you know, it is perfectly appropriate for Anne Waldman's sung ballad to be in this chapter full of free verse. It's totally right. I see Emily Harnett here. Hey, Emily. Uh-oh, we have a sound problem. Can you figure out how to fix that, and we'll come back to you? But it's great to see you in any case. Zach, do you have any advice for Emily? You're her friend. Can you figure this out? Okay. Yeah, he says yes, so stay tuned. Anna, we have someone on the phone?
We do, actually, and it's her comment is super related to everything that you were just talking about.
Is she the second caller?
She is.
So she gets the
Zong.
Norbesi Philip, and here's the Zong. Okay, so Zong for whom?
It's going to be for Melissa Silva.
Oh, Melissa.
Yeah.
I think this might be her first call.
Very good. Yep.
Yes.
Hi, Melissa. Hello? Melissa, are you able to hear me? She's still connected, but we're not getting sound. Melissa?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Al.
How are you? Is this the first time you've called?
Yes.
Great. Chris is going to do his magic to try to bring your voice up a little louder. You've been in ModPo for quite a while, but this is your first call.
Yes.
Why did you decide to call?
I wanted to be caller number 2 and get Zong because I'm broke and I can't afford books of poetry.
That is so cool. I love this. It's like a game show.
Meanwhile,
you know?
I did have a question. In fact, when I got Anna, I said, am I caller number 2, which I'm not sure is correct in an academic setting. But anyway, no, I did have this comment. I had mentioned to you this a while back, Al, that I wanted to discuss in the introduction to this week, you talk about Ginsberg and his prosody. And I'm very intrigued with this whole issue of the Beats writing something well constructed, but related to spontaneity. And so 40 years ago, I was at Naropa for a summer about oral tradition.
Were you?
With the Beats. Yeah, with the beats. With
Tell us who
Ginsberg,
was there.
Waldman, Amira
You must have
Baraka,
met Waldman, Baraka.
Gregory Corso, Jerome Rothenberg.
I hope you didn't get too close to Corso. He was very, very not nice.
It's rated R, but I told you in an email, but
Okay.
I won't go there.
Yeah, please. Corso was the worst.
Yeah, but brilliant.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because they also had poets there from oral traditions. There was the American Indian poet Joy Harjo, and there was a poet from an oral tradition in Japan, Anao Sakaki.
Right,
And
that's right. And they were there because Jerry Rothenberg, his influence through the ethnopoetics movement, brought those two movements together, which is very interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
he
Jerry
brought
was
them
responsible for that. Mm-hmm.
And there was a real gap between them. I mean, that summer you could really see, and I've studied oral traditions, that what you do with an oral tradition and what you do with prosody in a well-constructed poem that sounds spontaneous and from an oral tradition but isn't quite, are very different. And I'm very intrigued with how the beats do that. I mean, particularly Ginsberg, but Kerouac in his own little way there too.
Yes.
And, you know, for example, in oral traditions, I mean, some of what I would put out is that you use more alliteration, a lot more repetition. It's not as constructed, but it's more spontaneous.
Yeah.
And I feel there's a certain way the beats rein themselves in, ironically.
Yes,
from
ironically.
That tradition.
I don't. Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm going to turn to Molly and Emily if Emily has her sound fixed. Hey, Emily, you got it fixed? No, I guess you don't. Emily, you have some work to do on your audio. Maybe Zach can email you. Or you could come over here to the writer's house. You're only a few blocks away. Look at that. Okay, so I want to make sure Molly gets into this. And I guess I'll start in response. Melissa, will you stay on the line and then we can come back to you at the end? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I thought I would read a couple of lines from Howell and we can talk about the prosody. And I guess what I'm going to I'll start with Molly and ask Molly what she's hearing. What are you hearing? Because Melissa's right. The big paradox, and we talk about this in the videos in ModPo, I'm almost sure. I mean, there's a certain lie, there's a certain piece of bullshit in the assumptions, Kerouac's assumptions about spontaneity and Ginsberg, and that is, it's not that when you use language, spontaneity is not really possible. You are organizing, he revised, there's prosody is poetic, which is what Melissa was saying. So that whole little mystique ideology at the beginning of the beat movement was based on, lie is the right word. I mean, Ginsberg worked hard at these lines, worked hard at them. They were not spontaneous, but they created an aesthetic that foregrounds something that's more an open form, something that's long-lined, something that's Whitmanian. Whitman never claimed to be doing anything improvisational, and the Beats did. So you get something, Melissa, that actually, for me, resembles a 19th century torqued, wrought poet like Gerard Manley Hopkins, who is the least spontaneous poet you could get, and yet, so here's the closest to Hopkins you can get. Peyote solidities of halls, backyard green tree cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness over the rooftops, storefront burrows of tea-head joyride, neon blinking traffic lights, sun and moon and tree vibrations, in the roaring winter dusks of Brooklyn, ash can rantings and kind king light of mind, who chained themselves to subways for the endless ride from Battery to Holy Bronx on Benzedrine until the noise of wheels and children brought them down, shuddering, mouth racked and battered, bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance in the drear light of zoo. That last part, Molly, battered bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance in the drear light of zoo, if you just lineate it differently and put it in the 19th century, would be Gerard Manley Hopkins. Not spontaneous in the least. So what relationship, if any, I ask everyone starting with Molly, what relationship to spontaneity or improvisation, if any, does any of this have? It sounds flowy. People in the audience, when he performed this at the, at the club in 1956, they snapped and they drank their jugs of wine and they said, "Oh my God, this is new, this is flowing, this is just coming out of him." But obviously it wasn't. So what do we do with that? Molly, you want to start?
But do we know that it wasn't just coming out of him? I mean, do we know that that wasn't his way of spontaneous writing, that alliteration didn't flow for him? I mean, maybe...
Yeah, I mean, that's a completely fair question. I think in the case of Kerouac, he might come the closest to experimenting with spontaneity of any of them. We know we have the manuscript of Howell. It is so worked over. It is so not spontaneous. I mean, the original phrases might have been. Kerouac, with his ridiculous writing on a teletype roll so he wouldn't have to change sheets in the typewriter, or Old Angel Midnight, which is a later poem in which what he tried to do was actually listen to the sounds of the street in the East Village at night in his flat, just actually recording the ambient sounds of everyone else, which is quite an experiment. That comes somewhat close to just writing down what you hear. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but when I just read those lines from Howell, it has the kind of aesthetic of spontaneity, but it's clearly internal rhyme, alliteration, and so forth. So what do you think? What do you do? What do you personally do with that paradox?
I guess for me, I applaud the fakery. I applaud the perception of spontaneity, because it still does sound. It sounds like the wheels of the train, and it sounds like the blab of the pave. And if that took a little bit of translation and of honing to get there, I guess I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay, well said. Eric, can we get a mic to Eric? Do we have a portable mic? I'm checking in with Emily again. Emily, are you still there? And I think Allie joined us. Yeah. Emily is waving, Zach, but she's not doing much more. Allie, hi, good evening.
Hi, I had to unmute myself.
Oh, there you are. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm a little under the weather, but happy to be able to join.
We're glad you're here. So keep listening to the discussion about beat spontaneity, and maybe you'll add something to that. Eric?
Okay.
So in Ginsberg's composition of Howl, he was making himself very aware of the sound of Kerouac, and he wanted to achieve that sound and do something new with it in poetry. I think that the issue is here with looking at his, first thought, best thought, and mind is shapely. What is it? Line is shapely, mind poetry shapely, mind is shapely.
Something like that.
Right. As if that is something that he already had by the mid-50s. But I think this is something that emerges more for him in terms of his actual practice after Kaddish, which would mean after 1963 or something like
Kaddish
that.
is 59, 60. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that his real work towards using spontaneity is a product of a time that's later than Howell. And there is a connection between Kerouac's poetics and that kind of free spontaneity and the sound that Ginsberg wanted to achieve when he was writing Howell.
Yes, that's really well put. So, Melissa, are you still there?
Yes.
I'm gonna turn back to you in a sec, but I just want to say that Baraka, who as Leroy Jones was very much part of the Beat gang in the late 50s until he changed, changed affiliations, changed politics. Actually, coincided with his trip to Cuba in 1960. he and Kerouac, separately, I should point out, were very interested in the emergence of free jazz, which really comes into play in 58, 59, 60, 61. And free jazz is improvisation. So you get, Baraka writes How You Sound, which is this essay we have in the readings this week, which I hope we'll turn to next. And Kerouac writes Old Angel Midnight, and while they're very different people, they're dealing with how close language can actually come to free jazz style improvisation. And that leaves Ginsberg behind, who's very committed to the kind of gnarly, alliterative, and sort of more plainly political stuff. So I just want to play like 20 seconds of Old Angel Midnight. Then we'll go back to Melissa, and then we'll look at Baraka, How You Sound, which is a key document of this period. So everybody maybe get your text of How You Sound out, and we'll do that. Here's Jack doing Old Angel Midnight, the first page of Old Angel Midnight. And by the way, Clark Coolidge, who is a chapter 9.1 poet, a week 8 poet, a language poet, has written extensively about Kerouac as a kind of a languagey poet, not the novelist of On the Road, but a poet who's interested in what we call Babel flow. And Clark Coolidge is coming to the Writer's House, and with 2 other people, we'll be doing a poem talk on Old Angel Midnight. And now I'm really hoping to fold that into ModPo Plus. It's pretty amazing. If he comes, it's always a dicey thing. Okay, here's a little of Jack. You ready, Chris?
Universe, in all directions, in and out, you got your men, women, dogs, children, horses, pones, ticks, perts, parts, pans, pools, pauls, pails, parturiences, and petty thieveries that turn into heavenly Buddha. I know, boy, what's I talking about, 'cause I made the world, and when I made it, I no lie had a Lucian Midnight for my name and concocted up a world so nothing you had forever thereafter make believe it's real.
There's about 4 or 5 minutes of that in YouTube. And what he's doing there, he's sitting in his apartment at about 2 in the morning, Old Angel Midnight, Old Angel 2 a.m., and he's actually writing down what he hears in the street. So a lot of poets today would be more interested in doing that. This was a very unusual thing then. Melissa, can we turn back to you? Do you have a final thought on this topic that you raised? And then we'll go to Baraka.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you bring up about the musicality. And not to omit that Baraka was also coming from a Black oral tradition. And I feel is somewhat connected to slam poets down the line. But I think, and I agree that Kerouac is probably the most spontaneous. I think it's interesting to think of that maybe an oral tradition and spontaneity are the inspiration or an echo, but not even necessarily the scaffolding.
That's fascinating. Melissa, we're going to turn to How You Sound and see if we continue the conversation about sound, but I want to thank you for calling.
Okay,
And
thank you, Al.
Congrats on getting Zong. Thank you for being part of ModPo. And maybe you can post to the forum about your experience at Naropa. I think that would be great.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Thank
you
Al. So much. Bye-bye. Should we turn to How You Sound? Has everybody got that out? Why don't we go to Amber Rose, Allie, and Gabe, and Emily, if she can get her sound. No?
That's good.
Yes, good. Okay, great. Do you have...
Rose says don't start with her.
Okay, good.
My Wi-Fi, I need a second.
All right, great. So we'll go to Gabe first, then Allie and Emily. This is a really important text. It appeared in the New American Poetry 1960 anthology, which really broke things open. And it is a poetics statement. It's an ars poetica. How You Sound, 2 question marks. It's in the main ModPo syllabus, and I'll read a couple of lines from the key 2nd paragraph and 3rd paragraph. All right. My poetry is whatever I think I am. Can I be light and weightless as a sail, heavy and clunking like 8 black boots? I can be anything I can, all caps. I can make a poetry of what I feel is useful and can be saved out of all the garbage of our lives. Skipping to the next paragraph. And all that means that I must be completely free to do just what I want in the poem. All is permitted. There cannot be anything that I must fit the poem into. Everything must be made to fit into the poem. There must not be any preconceived notion or design for what the poem ought to be. So that's a pretty strong statement, and it's extremely complicated in its use of the phrase completely free, especially since we know where Baraka is going to be going in the couple of years after he wrote this. So, Gabe, you want to start with this? Then we'll go to Allie and Emily.
Sure. I don't know if you want to hit on any angles, but just taking like a reaction to the parts that you just read.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about, like reading this, I love this statement at the end, or I find it interesting that he says we can get nothing from England. So there's this like way in which it feels like here we're trying to reestablish what we think of as like where poetry comes from. And so this whole thing of there's nothing that the poem should fit into is most like surface level about forms that we need to fit into, traditions we need to fit into. And instead it seems like Baraka feels like the more humane thing to do is to let the poem be massive and expansive and free in a stylistic sense, which is why the poem almost like eats things up, like it says everything must fit into the poem.
Yeah, that's really well put. Allie, I want to turn to you. That last paragraph of this statement says we need to go into quantitative verse, and what he means there is projective verse of Charles Olson and the irregular foot of William Carlos Williams, whose irregular foot, Williams, of course, hated Eliot. Anybody who went to England hated England. Sorry, Eric. You know, really like, and Baraka, or Leroy Jones at this point, was saying something about the irregularity and the so-called non-metricality of the kind of American poetry that he was interested in exploring at this moment. And so it's crazy to say this is formless. He wants an irregular foot rather than a regularly metrical foot. So this is really like, this is apoetics. This is not an abandonment of poetics. This is really important. Okay, Allie, your thought on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And in terms of just addressing that last statement that you mentioned, I think, I mean, it's important that, of course, he's saying we shouldn't be looking towards the like English example that we're used to, while still saying, you know, that irregular foot of Williams was the departure, and that led to something new. And I think that he is kind of like extending or trying to like suss out that newness even further.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I'm just really drawn to in general is at the top where he says, and the final, the totality of mind, spiritual God. I think, you know, in him saying his poem will not be made to fit into anything, there's this kind of like awesome juxtaposition of like this totality of consciousness that can't be fit into one person idea, etc.
Yes. He's basically redefining freedom to associate first with the sound of one's voice, and second, with the political sense of free, as in free jazz. So free jazz in 1960 got very political very fast. And a lot of the jazz purists thought, oh, well, this is extending bebop into a freer musical form, but it actually was making claims about freedom. So the Freedom Suite of 1960 was one of the most political gestures of the free jazz movement. I think Baraka is interested in that double sense of freedom. So I want to go to Emily and then Amber Rose, if you have a comment at this point. How you sound, I mean, this is a very unusual title. And he says, all those out of tradition a poet can use, adapt, worked over into something for himself to broaden his own voice with. You have to start and finish there, your own voice, how you sound. So, Emily, your thought on this?
Feels almost like a manifesto, and one of the poems which seems the most kind of explicit joining of poetics and politics that we have, and seems really effectively to be occupying this double register and addressing the fact that traditional forms can feel as restrictive and oppressive, even violent, in the same way that traditional identity categories can feel restrictive and oppressive and violent, and that you can't read the world as the person you would want to be if you don't really have forms artistically or socially to occupy them. Yeah, and thinking through those registers at the same time is really exciting.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Emily. Amber Rose, let's get one more thought on the Baraka.
Yeah,
anything at all?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about, I agree with everything that's been said about form and this free jazz influence, but I also, this line where he says, if the poem has got to be a sonnet, unlikely though, or whatever, it'll certainly let me know. So I think that there's a way that folks want to read Baraka, and especially because he's a black poet, and especially because he does have this lineage through to spoken word poetry, that folks want to funnel Baraka into this only free jazz, like only free jazz, only oral tradition, you know, whatever, spontaneous, yada, yada. But he's also saying, so his obsession is not so much with not using form at all, but it's with centering the poem and centering your voice and then allowing whatever form it needs to take over. And that's like a slight pivot in the reading, but I think that that's really crucial because there are all kinds of racialized politics, I think, that get read into like reading him as completely formless. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then the last piece, what you said about how you sound, I'm also thinking about sound as a verb. So this idea of like a sounding board. So when he talks about bringing other things outside of tradition into yourself, like allowing tradition to be something that reflects off of your voice or that your voice absorbs, but keeping you or the poet or the poem or whatever at the center.
It also means exploration, sounding.
Right.
Sounding out, sounding the depths.
So there are a few tenses that he's playing with. For that.
On the first point, it's crucial. I think that's where we were when we were talking about this. He's not talking about getting rid of feet. He's talking about embracing the irregular foot. He's very, very interested in forms. In fact, when he grapples with Claude McKay and County Cullen, earlier Harlem Renaissance poets, and we'll look at Incident, I guess, the poem called Incident, where he's basically trying to complicate the subject-object relations in Cullen, but he's not calling Cullen out saying, that form doesn't work for you. Not at all, right? And those poems, by the way, teachers out there, to use Cullen's Incident and Baraka's Incident together is really instructive on this question, and maybe with how you sound along with it. All right, very cool. Do you want to just do the tweets for a little bit, Davey, and then maybe we'll switch to Baraka's Incident? Do we have a phone call? No. So the number is 484-352-2429. Why don't you look at the tweets? And Ambrose, you have Facebook, but maybe there's nothing happening there, or?
Yeah, no one wants to talk to me.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to go to the forums. You first, Davey.
So one great tweet that I wanted to shout out was a couple of minutes ago, Cindy McMillan is asking in response to Melissa's question that we were talking about, can the art of revision also be spontaneous? Recreation adding to the flow?
Great question.
And given the conversation we were having, sort of pivoting revision and spontaneity as kind of poles of each other, she really turns that on its head. And I thought that was a really useful and interesting question.
That is really great. Greg Gallagher from Washington. Ann Waldman, Rogue State, what a nasty woman, which is a quote from President, then not President Trump, referring to Hillary Clinton. Just to say that, just to make that clear. Okay. Yeah, so there's some good stuff happening in the forums. Keep going, folks. Nicole, I really do love Bob Kaufman. So she came back with that. Okay, should we go? Should we do Incident? Should we talk about Incident? There is no recording of Baraka performing Incident. Should we read it? Yeah, I think we should read it. Who wants to read it? Okay, Amber Rose is going to read it, and then I'm going to ask Erika and Joe to start us off on responding, and particularly think about this in relation to Cullen's Incident, which is a ModPo staple from week 5.
He came back and shot. He shot him. When he came back, he shot, and he fell, stumbling, past the shadow wood, down, shot, dying, dead to full halt. At the bottom, bleeding, shot dead. He died then, there after the fall. The speeding bullet tore his face, and blood sprayed fine over the killer and the gray light. Pictures of the dead man are everywhere, and his spirit sucks up the light. But he died in darkness darker than his soul, and everything tumbled blindly with him dying down the stairs. We have no word on the killer, except he came back from somewhere to do what he did, and shot only once into his victim's stare, and left him quickly when the blood ran out. We know the killer was skillful, quick, and silent, and that the victim probably knew him. Other than that, aside from the caked souredness of the dead man's expression and the cool surprise in the fixture of his hands and fingers, we know nothing.
Thank you, Amber Rose. Joe first. Joe, any thoughts about this, either in relation to Cullen or in general, and then Erika? Hey, Joe, you there? We see your sweater only. No? Okay, we're going to go to Erika, and then we'll see if we can get Joe back. Erika Kaufman, any thoughts on this Baraka poem?
It's such a, I'm kind of rendered speechless every time I read it.
Why?
Because he's relaying an event that can be many events, unfortunately, in pretty great detail, while also using the poetic form brilliantly. So the idea that down the stairs and we have no word are their own stanzas.
Wow.
The comparison to the Cullen, the Cullen is also relaying an incident, but it's not. First of all, it's written in a different time period, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And second, it's not a shooting; it's a conversation.
Yeah, it's a young person's first experience of racist hatred that affects him for the rest of his life. Here you have a speaker observing a shooting, and nothing is clear about who did it and to whom it was done.
Yeah.
So I guess, Davey, I want to turn to you on this. I guess I agree with Erika. It leaves me speechless. And I think that one of the things that's so powerful this time around about it is that it says no, in a way, it says no to traditional modern notions of subjectivity, right? By saying, I'm not going to tell you about this one incident. I'm going to tell you what I know, and therefore I'm reporting it from one subjectivity. But because it's plural, it takes on a kind of social objectivity. Like, this is what happens. And yet we don't, the police don't know, we know nothing. That knowing nothing is a kind of existential situation, but this is an objective truth, and therefore it gets to be plural. Yeah, so it's super powerful in resituating modern subjectivity. Anyway, your thoughts?
It also gets to be expansive, not only in terms of its speaker and in terms of its subject and the position of its subject, but also in terms of time. That the Cullen poem is really about an incident of, like, this moment happened. Like, I was out in the public sphere and this thing happened and I want to tell you what happened. This isn't a finite moment. It has the recursivity of its first couple of lines. He came back and shot. He shot him. When he came back, he shot, and he fell stumbling.
But Cubism. It's Steinian. It's a shot person descending the staircase.
Sure, that's true, and that descent is really useful for thinking about what the incident is. Is the shooting the incident? Is the proliferation of the pictures of the dead man are everywhere? Is that part of the incident? Where does the incident stop? Are these responses to it? Is this the coverage of it? And yet the poem is an instantiation of an incident. This isn't a poem about an incident. The poem is itself an incident. The poem is something happening. And I think that the expansiveness is not only in terms of the information we don't know about the event that's being described, but also the kind of meditation that Baraka is doing on what the space is between an event and its reception. The reception is therefore becoming part of the event.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Gabe, a question for you. I think that it's fair to say of the Cullen poem or any earlier poem, do we know who did the act of hatred? Do we know who's the perpetrator? And we do. It's the Baltimorean looking straight at me. It's very clear. You can answer it. When you ask, in the case of this poem, who did it? It's a whodunit, isn't it? Who did it? How do you answer that question? Because actually that is the major social question that's being asked. Who did it? Who's responsible?
Well, it's more like their answer is available, and the answer to that question is also the answer to several other questions. So who shot him? He did is the problem that we have here. And
it could be the same he or a different he.
So, I mean, it seems from a lot of the language that it is a different person, but we don't have any clues to why they're different, how they're different, especially since, as Davey was saying, the timeline is all screwed up. It's repetitive, it's incidental, and there's a way in which it almost seems like each time it happens, it causes it to happen another time, as if incident to something.
Yes.
So it's almost like, it's not that we can't answer the question. We actually are given a vocabulary to answer the question. It's just that once we do, we actually don't know what the consequences of that are.
The rhetorics that are borrowed, so Emily, I'm turning to you next. The rhetorics that are borrowed from, intentionally, like almost quoted, are twofold. The rhetoric of journalism and the rhetoric of police report, right? And yet that is, what do we know? You can imagine a police sergeant standing behind the podium saying, well, so far what we know is, right? Except it ends with, we know nothing. Who's we, Emily Harnett?
We, I think it could be the reader, of course, the American public, all the potential meanings of we.
Yeah. And is there anybody want to say the significance of that? That we know nothing? If we are the readers and we know nothing, then what the hell is the point of reading a poem? Lily?
Well, to me, I read that as the speaker of the poem might have more information than they're willing to share.
Because
the speaker has some. It's the speaker's the one reporting, and they seem to be tapping into this, they seem to be almost like a interpreter between being at the scene and then giving the official word or whatever.
Yeah.
So not, interpreter is the wrong word, but mediator.
Is there foul play? I mean, it seems to me the potential for foul play is that the speaker doesn't feel free enough to say what he knows.
You're looking at Davey, but Davey and I are the same person. So
okay.
I disagree with this reading of the we. I think that because it is taking the form of this kind of police report, I think the we is the police. I mean, I think
they know nothing.
Yeah, I mean, this rhetoric, so what Davey was saying about this incident being both Davey and Erika about this incident being something that does and can repeat. This language of "we know nothing" is very much speaking about white people and white people that are in power and white police officers that are cooperating with state power. So I'm actually really uncomfortable with saying that this is some kind of like meta poem moment where it's the poet speaking to the speaker. I think that Baraka is being very clear in that "we know nothing" is pointing a finger at white power, white state power, and police officers that claim to know nothing when they actually do know something very specific.
This is what I meant by foul play. I mean, there's a reading of this poem that this speaker doesn't feel able to point the finger at the real perpetrator, which could indeed be the police who sponsor a report saying they know nothing about what happened.
You don't think that Baraka is pointing a finger to a very specific group of we's?
Well, he's pointing a finger clearly pointing the finger at anybody who knows nothing in a situation like this, or claims to know nothing. But what I'm saying, and I've never heard this reading before, but it may be that what the speaker is saying, I don't know about Baraka, but what the speaker is saying is, I think I know who did this, and I think it's the police who did this, and I'm not capable of saying that, and so quotes the police rhetoric, which is, "we know nothing," when in fact we know a lot more. I don't know. Joe Massey, you've rejoined us. Did you have you caught on to this incident conversation?
Yeah, my connection is poor tonight.
Okay, sorry about that.
It is contrary, I suppose, to what Amber Rose had said. When I say "we have no word," and then there's nothing else following that line until you get to the break, until you go to the next line. It's a statement on the limitations of language, and then the haltingness of the prosody of the poem, those commas, that stopping and starting. It's almost like this effort to articulate something that is not so easily articulated, if at all, which is a murder, horrible thing, unconscionable.
Oh, we have no word. If it refers to the words that we're reading, it's saying we don't yet know exactly what kind of language is going to be needed in order to describe a situation like this. Right. Davey?
I want to respond to that for a second by thinking about some of the space between Amber Rose you're reading and Joe you're reading, and thinking about the way that both of those things are happening, I think, kind of productively. In the space of "we have no word," that language sort of performing a kind of mourning that isn't happening, mourning that's a cover-up of like, this is really tragic, we have no words, and to have that break lead into the line on the killer, we have no word on the killer, and to be able to think about a kind of performed collective mourning masking a kind of knowledge that's not interested in the way that it's implicated, of being able to abdicate a position of power by saying, I'm having this collective experience of mourning with you, and therefore I'm not going to be responsible for the fact that I am withholding knowledge that is causing this situation to happen.
Right. Yeah. And Baraka said many times, around the time that he wrote this poem, that the existing rhetorics for describing violence fail. And in this poem, he seems to be using and showing the failure of two of those existing rhetorics. One is the journalistic report, and the other is the police report. They have no words. Do we have somebody on the phone? We don't. Okay, good. Here's some other poems. Let's do one more, and then we'll wrap up. So Creeley's I Know a Man we haven't talked about. Jane Cortez, She Got, He Got, we haven't talked about. We did a little bit of Howell, talked about Kaufman. Yeah, I think Creeley, Cortez are options. I'm going to let Erika tell us what we should talk about quickly for the end.
Let's do Cortez.
Okay, so let me just play a few seconds of it, and we can talk about it. And here it goes. This is, of course, part of a video. Whoops, that's not right. That's us talking about it. Here it is. Okay, and she is performing with her son, Donardo Coleman.
She got hot, got happy, got hot, got thrilled, got hot, got degreed, got hot, got silly, got hot, got possessive, got hot, got disappointed, got hot, got hurt, got hot, got nurtured, got hot, got bitter, got hot, got drunk, got hot, got drugged, got hot, got rastered, got hot, got pregnant, got hot, got rejected, got hot, got indifferent, got hot, got lost, got hot, got born again, got hot again, got political again, got hot again, got academically ambitious again, got hot again. She got hot, 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 hot again. Got to be a hot skeleton in the latest hot fashion. Got to be a hot feminist turning into a hot cultural investigative gadfly. Got hot, got hot. She got hot, she got hot. She got hot and got like a hot exile flying into alcoholic tantrums on hot buses. Got hot, got hot, got hot. She got.
Okay, let's just go around and offer observations about this work, and maybe we can build up to something. Allie, would you start? I'm just going to go around randomly, and if you want to pass, that's fine.
Yeah, I think just hearing this, particularly in this week of like social media, Me Too, it's very, and of course there are so many different readings of the word hot, but it's always an assessment coming from an external source. And there's this whole other life narrative happening parallel to that insistence. And it's just a very rich, it makes me, it's the type of poem, we've been listening to it for years now, and it keeps presenting new layers.
Thank you so much, Allie. Emily, you want to add a thought to this?
No, that pretty much aligns perfectly with my different poem.
Emily, your connection is bad. Sorry.
And yeah, and one of
Okay, we're gonna pass Emily. Maybe we can get better for the a final thought. Gabe, any thought on this?
Yeah, this is a poem I really like. And young Coleman does really great on the drums. I love the way in which they like sync up at times and then totally go off of each other. Sometimes she like floats above the rhythm and sometimes she's right on it. Like there's a part later where I think when she gets to the he part where they're just every syllable is hit at the same time exactly. So I think there's a way in which like I like to think about this poem in relationship to performance, and just the way it's done is really interesting. And I feel like we get to talk a bit about the kind of like complicated heterosexual space of the poem, but also like I think we need to add or talk a bit more about how the drummer like relates to her words, her text, and her performance, and how these two are actually playing off of each other in a really useful way for something that is so much about like two people interacting.
Yeah, great. Joe, do you want to say something about this?
No, I love what Gabe said though.
Fantastic. Erika?
I think I'm with Gabe and Allie. I really love this poem, and I particularly like that conversation that happens between her and Coleman.
Fantastic. Amber Rose, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think something that's really exciting to me about this poem is the again, because so much of the poem feels like, or at least this section that you just played feels like, you know, she's describing this femme person arriving for the first time at some of these things, but then you know, she got politically inspired again, or she got academically charged up again. and kind of hinting at the cyclical nature of catching fire for the things that you're doing in the world is very subtle, but a really important reminder when you're thinking about the ebb and flow of inspiration as a creative person. So the cyclical nature.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Lily, your thought?
Yeah, the section that we just played, especially with the whole poem, really makes me think of the concept of how we use the word got in English, in that what kind of different idiomatic phrasings got is a part of. So like the difference between she got inspired and she got pregnant, and like what levels of agency the person in question is like able to participate in there is being very different, but syntactically, we collapse them into the same hierarchical relationships, like between subject and action.
Fantastic. My thought is exactly that, or it's very similar to that. When someone says to me, the language is tired, I can't really use the basic language anymore, I'm kind of out of words. This is the one I give to them. I say, look, you got a pronoun gendered one way first and then another way, and there's a whole topic there we don't have time for, but then got, which is possess of, be possessed by, have harm done to, do harm to, or do strength to someone else. And this is like the proof that poetry doesn't have to use a lot of different words in order to do a myriad amazing things. And the fact that you have it's a musical piece just stresses the relationship between, in a song, a kind of chorus that gets repeated, and you think, oh, well, we're not playing that chorus again. But every time it's new. This is about as make it new a poem as there could be in the spirit of experimentation. Anyway, I said the obvious. Davey?
Something I want to add on to Amber Rose's thought, because we're one person, is in addition to thinking about the way that individual inspiration is cyclical, also the way that relationships are cyclical, and the way that She Got Hot produces a lot of different kind of responses. Like the same thing happens between two people who have some sort of intimate connection or relationship, and it doesn't always elicit the same response. That depending what's going on with you, sometimes I will
You mean me, actually?
You,
Al.
yeah, you.
Okay,
yeah.
here we go.
Two people with an intimate relationship.
Yeah.
When I came into this room, you were like, hi, and I didn't do as animated of a job as I should have done, being like, hi, Al, and you were like, oh no, that
did happen.
That did happen. That was a real thing that happened, and that's just like a useful moment of interpersonal interaction. That just because you're coming at someone the same way, you end up on a very different train of interaction based on one very slight difference.
Yes.
And the way that unfolds in this poem is really exciting.
That's great. Thank you. Eric?
I have a really left field reading of this. For me, I interpreted this as a kind of critique of the aesthetics of biography, as opposed to a critical engagement with something. So when I encountered the poem, first I love the.
I've done that reading in previous years.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay.
Well, but Donardo Coleman's dad. Is that where we're going?
Well, no, I wasn't going to take it there, but I just, as I followed the music of the poem, I'm thinking, God, if I'm writing the biography, or if I've got to produce to a publisher, what is this going to look like as I talk about this person's life as a creative person? I'm going to do all these things. And it becomes too reducible because the music of it is so much part of it, but it can't get on the page unless you get into a critical engagement with it.
Yeah, that's very well put. Last year, I think I did an autobiographical reading having to do with Coleman and free jazz and the relationship there, which is a very important and complicated one. Anna, since we just sort of did final words, although I'm sure I want to get Emily back in, see if we can get something from her. Anna, would you just add something about the week or about next week, just so we can hear your fantastic thought?
I don't have too many thoughts today. My brain's a little empty. But I did want to shout out to, I was going to use my final word to shout out to a really fun ModPo Plus recording. I think it was you, me, and Emily And Davey was there, I think.
Yeah, what
we
is
did
it?
the Elise Cowan.
Yes, Elise Cowan.
Lily was there, maybe? Were you there for that?
I thought Lily was there. Elise Cowan, who dated Ginsburg for 6 months or something, and who actually claimed, Ginsburg claimed that she typed Kaddish. So there is a lot of traditional beat sexism in the role that she played, who was a poet, and everybody admired her poetry, and she wrote some Dickinsonian poems. So we got Beat Dickinson, Elise Cowan.
Yeah, it's just cool if you're
absolutely worth looking at, yeah. Okay, Emily Harnett, it's so good to see you. I know, I just want to say to your many fans that you're teaching during the day at a school just outside of Philly, and that's why you're a little scarce, but we're happy to see you. How are you?
I'm good. I spent all day outside, which isn't good for someone with my constitution, but glad to be here and to see you all.
Yeah. What's it like teaching? I mean, I guess your years of ModPo makes it all very easy. You can say anything at any time about anything.
Oh, I certainly wouldn't say it's very easy, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Apparently, I love teens. Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought? I love that. Okay, well, I just have a couple of final shout-outs, two, actually. One is to the Are We Too Nice thread. This is really an ongoing conversation, and many of us are thinking a lot about it. So, are we too nice? And it started with somebody saying, I think everybody in ModPo is too nice to each other. And that's kind of a big topic, right? So anyway, Ken Hay writes recently, I'm not sure that being nice is the beginning and end of the ways to articulate this discussion, but it is in there to be sure. I think people are not merely being nice. They're doing what they can, and laudably so, to build one another up in a way that might reflect the goals of the poetry that we are studying. In other words, there's something of an elixir in the poetry that might just help improve the world. So what he does there is he redefines nice, which was originally used somewhat satirically, nice being kind of flat, benign, and boring. And Hay is saying, we need to start with nice if we're going to do this stuff together. Being nice is part of it, sure. Isn't that still part of the goal of the arts? They're probably not so evident these days, but it is still there. And then someone else wrote me somewhat snarkily, is this gregarious character of our dear leader, which referring to me, dear leader is a very powerful political word, so I just want to pass that one over. The totally admirable Professor Phil Reese, dripping with irony. Is this in the course's DNA, or is it just the general niceness of Americans? So I wrote, first of all, I put a little photo of someone bowing, thank you. Kind of you to say, I write, DNA implies that it's in there and could never be taken out. That is, the DNA of ModPo is to be nice. I rather think that we all end up working hard at it. It is not nature that ModPo is nice. It is nurture. It is what we make of it that's nice. And that's why Are We Too Nice is such a really good topics. And then I wrote general niceness of Americans, I don't think I can touch that topic with a 10-foot pole. And finally, a shout out to Sofia Pandya, who's a poet that we know well from the San Francisco area. She's been in Sonoma for years. She doesn't mind me reminding people of what we've learned from her, was that she was many, many, many years ago a political exile, and came to the United States without documentation and has been in the San Francisco area as a poet. And she goes on Facebook and in her books as Sophia Naz. We met her in San Francisco last year. She lost in the recent fire. She lost everything. She lost her house. Everything burned. And the people in the Facebook group have written to her asking what we can do to help. I asked her, and she said, thanks so much. One way of extending support would be to buy a copy of my two newly published books, and also to spread the word about them. One is called Pointillism, and Date Palms. They're both available at www.translucence.net. Sofia Naz, Translucence. Buy her book. And here is a poem that she wrote after losing her house. She posted a photo of it. Bereft of possessions, but rich in love. Just keep on dancing. Make a tabletop of sky, a shawl of sunsets, a single bright earring of the moon. So that's best wishes to Sofia Pandya, Sofia Naz. Buy her book. And thank you so much. Amber Rose, thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
Thank you, Al.
And my friend Lily. I almost called you Allie.
Wow.
Lily, thank you as always.
welcome.
Davey.
I love you, Al.
Eric. What did you say?
I love you, Al.
I love you too. We do have a relationship. This is great. I'm feeling really good. Anna, thank you so much.
Thanks, Al.
Allie, good to see you.
You
We
too.
hope you
Thank
feel
Al.
better.
Thanks.
Emily Harnett, do some great stuff with your students. Gabe,
I'll try.
see you tomorrow morning when you have to borrow your key to let me into my office.
Sounds like a plan.
Joe Massey, great to see you.
Great to see you. My office hour begins now, by the way.
Oh, fantastic. And Erika Kaufman, thank you so much. ModPo is about the live interactions. It's about the discussion forums. It's about the meetups. And it's about office hours. Please come see us in office hours. It's crazy not to. We're here. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week. Next week, we move on to the New York School. All right. Take care. Have a good evening.